Hello, and welcome to Castle Talk, where we talk to writers and creators of today's genre worlds. I'm your host, Jason Henderson, publisher at Castle Bridge Media, home of the Castle of Horror anthology. Tonight, we're chatting with Chris Cullari and Jennifer Raite, directors of the new film AVIARY, which premieres April 29th in theaters and digital and on demand. The film follows two women, Malin Akerman and Lorenza Izzo, on the run from an oppressive and controlling cult led by Chris Messina as Seth, and they are moving dangerously farther into starvation and the desert. And I am happy that you're here to talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Jason.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right. One of the things that I was watching early on, you've got Malin Akerman and Lorenza. Is it Izzo or Izzo? How do you say that?
It's so,
So,
I
Izzo.
believe, yeah.
Okay, Malin Akerman and Lorenza Izzo are making their escape from a cult that everybody has said is very much like NXIVM. For those of us who watched all the documentaries, and I watched every documentary about the NXIVM cult, and one of the things that shows up is Malin Akerman is talking about how she had reported a friend to the cult. And what I was thinking about was how that was very much like, and now she's making her escape, but she had reported somebody else for insubordination, and that had resulted in punishment. And what I was thinking about was how that's true with all of those people who make their escape, because there's always guilt. Because if you've sold yourself into this thing, you take on culpability because you start acting and playing your part. And I was wondering how much you were thinking about those examples and in NXIVM, and how you brought it into the script.
yeah,
Yeah,
I'll.
go
So
ahead.
I think we were definitely thinking about NXIVM. I think Jen and I have broadly been interested in cults for a long time, and systems of belief, why we believe what we believe. I was raised very Catholic, and certainly still have deal with the fallout from that sometimes. And I think what was kind of interesting to us is that we're moving into a phase in our culture where not only does everybody have the I don't want to say opportunity or ability to join a cult, but we literally live in a world of influencers and followers.
Yeah,
And a lot of these more modern cults, I think when we looked at a character like Seth, there's certainly a little bit of NXIVM in there, but Seth looks at himself, and we looked at Seth just as much as a technology leader, a thought
right.
leader.
Well, Keith Rainier called himself. They were success programs.
Yes.
They were at first
Yeah.
aimed at executives and people starting businesses on how to bring out your successful self. And
Yeah.
God, I
Yeah.
say that, and it sounds culty, doesn't it? I mean, when you,
Yeah. Well, but I think something you're seeing too, that made me, that I think we both pulled from, and now some of these projects are starting to come out, but like there is such a like the line between what we consider a cult and what we consider a business like WeWork is
yes,
getting like thinner and thinner. And so I think part of what broadly, I guess, that all this to say, part of what we were interested in was pushing past even the idea of something that was started with the idea of corralling people and growing into a cult, and something that was a little bit more of just a program gone wrong, which I think
yeah.
it's kind of where like Nexia was sort of a little bit of our jumping off point for that, and then we wanted to push past that.
Well, what I find fascinating is, just as in, Lifeboat is really a 90-minute
Mm,
drama about a bunch of people in a small space, right? You've got a giant space. You have, or at least it appears to be, but
mm,
you have this giant this giant desert, and ultimately it's a two-hander about these two women dealing with one another as they try to get out of the situation. And I want to ask you a little bit about the writing process. So how does this work? You're having beers and you go, hey, what are we going to do? And you go, how about something that jumps off of like how people try to leave a cult? And how does that become a story? Like you go, oh, maybe it's two men, maybe it's two women, maybe they're talking to one another, maybe they're by themselves. I mean, talk to me about how you put that together.
Yeah, I mean, I think with us, it's usually when one of us finds something that like really captures the imagination, and then we pitch it to the other person, and that person goes, "Ooh, yeah." Like,
Yeah.
I feel like that's the origin of any script that we write. So, I think it's different for everyone, but I think with us it tends to start with the thematics or sometimes like the story or the characters, but it's really like the ideas underneath of like, oh, wouldn't it be interesting if we told a story exploring these ideas, and then we think about like what's the form. And we have been I think we've been chasing a like what's the most interesting way to do the most interesting, most contemporary relevant way to do a cult story for a
Mm.
while, and this is sort of where we landed.
Yeah, I
um
would say every script for us is a collision of multiple things. So in this case, there was the thematic element, and really the script started, I think, with really just the simple. I forget if Jen pitched it to me or if I pitched it to her, but it started with the
Jen, do you
simple.
remember? Like, was this that's such a
no,
funny
this
way of saying, I don't remember if this was my idea or if it
Yeah,
was
no, and
that happens all the time with us, which is I think good. At the end of the day, good.
that's
well,
awesome. Yeah.
yeah, it becomes very mind meldy, and this is the beginning of this was so long ago now that it's tough to remember, but we landed on the imagery of the opening sequence as sort of like you've got two people running, they're running from a place, they stop to look back, and one of them looks a little too long. And it
Mhm.
just felt like, man, that look back is such a simple thing that's so loaded.
Yeah.
And when you have, part of the reason we liked starting it on the run was both it got us off to the jump right away, but it also in a good way gives you no context for what that look means, and then the mystery of the film becomes what was the meaning of that, who's telling the truth,
Yeah.
what secrets are they hiding, and who can you trust. And so starting it in that place just felt like, man, that's a interesting, dramatically compelling place to start a story. And then the structure of the movie did become, as many writers do, I think we write ourselves little challenges by coming up with an idea, and then you go, okay, well, where do you go from there?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that became part of the fun and the challenge of writing the movie was, it forced us in a really great way to constantly have the story spiral inward and dig deeper into our characters and peel back layers of who they were and what they wanted, and instead of spiraling outwards into bigger conspiracies or
Well, or
anything.
it could have been more survival horror. I mean, in a sense,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
becomes there's survival. They're just like in Alive, they're having to
Mhm.
divide up the small amount of food they have,
Yeah.
but and that's scary, and we can all like sit there and watch it and go, I don't know, how would I do in this situation? Badly. The answer is terribly. But but you've turned it so that the story involves also secrets that they're keeping from one another,
Yeah.
and also secrets they sometimes seem to keep from themselves as
Mhm.
they're getting more tired and more they have no water, and they're starting to go a little bit crazy,
Yeah.
and you can't eat the plants because they'll drive you crazy.
Yeah.
um I'm wondering about, well, so you talked a little bit about the process of writing it, and if we get the chance, I'd love to know more about that. But so much of it is Malin and Lorenza, and I'm just curious, and the story goes through beats just like you would with a play. But I'm curious, like, did you do rehearsal? First of all, when did you do this, and what kind of preparation did they have? I mean, are they looking at these pages the day before? Or did you rehearse it, or how did it work?
No, yeah, I mean, once the actors came on board, we because it was a COVID movie, we had less access really to like like, there was a lot of discussion of like, do we want to rehearse over Zoom? What is that going to feel like? That feels inauthentic to
So it
us.
is
So
a
we
COVID movie. You shot during the pandemic. Well, I guess you had to. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. We
Yeah.
Yeah.
shot.
So
Go ahead, Jen. Sorry.
we ended up doing more conversation,
Hmm.
more talking about the characters, more talking about the arcs, giving them an opportunity to be like, do you have questions? Are there things that aren't hitting you right for you? And every all all three of the leads all have like I think slightly different processes. So we were sort of tailoring to like what they were most interested
Mm.
in doing, what was the most helpful for them. And then we did end up having like two shorter rehearsals just with Malin and Lorenza before production, like a week out. to sort of go through each scene a little bit, like once or twice, and then everything else was just sort of a process on set. But because, it's a low budget movie, we had a limited amount of time, and Chris and I are big homework people. We love to
Yeah.
be super prepared. So we had as much ready on our end, and then, there were small changes that we'd make along the way of like Malin would be like, "You know what? I think I can do this in 2 lines instead of 3." So we would make trims like that on the day, or one of them being like, "Oh, this question doesn't feel right. Like, what if I say it this way instead?"
Mm.
But I think a lot of the preparation with the actors was more conversational than like a more traditional rehearsal space we
Well,
might have had on something
and
before COVID.
this is you guys direct. Am I correct? This is your directorial debut, correct?
Yeah, this is our
Yes.
first feature.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just wondering, but you'd done a lot of work before. I'm just curious if that whole process, I admit that the COVID universe introduces some cool new challenges, but I was wondering how you brought the experiences that you had before to putting this together. I mean, like, what was that like?
Yeah, preparation really, I think, was we both have, I think, the things that we'd learned doing shorts, and we directed an episode of a show that we created for YouTube Premium, that we directed one episode of.
Cool.
And those experiences were, they were smaller scale, but all of those experiences were very very time sensitive, and very, we had to have all of our ducks in a row. And that was, I think, what we really brought to this first feature, was making sure that, especially because there's 2 of us, which creates a great dialogue of, let's try this, let's try that. Do you think, like, we wanted to have all those conversations, or as many of those conversations as we could, in advance,
Hmm.
because we knew we weren't going to have a lot of time to have those conversations on set. And then really, I think once we got to set with the cast, I mean, we were Malin and Lorenza are both incredibly talented. And I think we had cast them with chemistry in mind. We'd cast Malin first, and then we looked for a partner that we felt like would work well with her. And then once we got to set, there was an element of realism that set in, because we did 14 days in the desert, and the
Yeah.
cast was there, and there was nowhere else to go, and it was hot, and it was cold, and there were snakes,
Wow.
and there were, and I think in a really great way, there was a positive pressure cooker of, we're outside during COVID with a certain number of days. And I think it added to the natural tension of a lot of the scenes. And I think brought out a natural chemistry and rhythm between them, where then it became our job just to really help them keep track of, their emotional states, different parts of the movie, the who believes what at what part of the movie.
Yeah.
Because and that was shooting, as all movies do, you shoot out of order, and there's lots of
Right.
different layers, and making sure that each scene, they're both calibrated, and they're both on the same page of, like, okay, right, in this scene, this just happened, and I know these facts, but I'm curious about this. And keeping everyone on the same page, juggling those things, was definitely, a creative and an organizational challenge.
What do you think? I'm really curious. What you guys would say. Like, whenever I talk to somebody who has a job that I don't understand or know anything about, I'll say, "Finish this sentence. It never ceases to be It never ceases to amaze me. Whatever." What surprised you about doing your first feature-length film? Like, what never ceased to amaze you in this process that you care to share? Because I can imagine, stuff that fills you with angst that you don't want to share. But yeah, to the extent that you can.
I mean, just the miracle of it all, like,
Mm.
just the miracle of bringing a movie together and having so many different moving parts, and every day everyone shows up with their A game, and builds this world that we wrote. Like, it I'm sure other people have said similar things like this. I hope it's not too cliche of an answer, but it really is just like, oh my god, all of a sudden you're standing in the world of this thing that you
Yeah.
wrote, and it never gets old. Every day, no matter how tired you are from the all-nighter the night before, you show up, and can't believe like that this is actually your job and you're doing this, and
Yeah,
that never got old.
the intensity of that contrast is what I think what makes it so special of like it matters so much to us. So we are at like maximum stress level and then every
Yeah.
day is like the most fun, like most creative, like most rewarding experience we've ever had. So like when you get to the end too, there's this feeling of like, oh my God, we did it. It's over. And also like, oh my God, it's over.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
um
postpartum depression from movies, right?
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I
yeah.
Amazing.
I would also say it never ceases to amaze you how quickly the sun sets when when you're racing it. It feels
Oh,
like
yeah.
30 seconds. And we had a lot of, one of the challenges we had was we had dusk work almost every single day on the schedule. We
Mm.
had scenes that had to be shot at magic hour almost every single day. And so we were scheduling a lot of our days around, okay, we know we need to have
Well, right. We would have every day. Well, it depends on like what time of year you're shooting, but like when we were shooting and where you're shooting. But I think we would have like 30 minutes of magic hour every day and like an hour of dusk.
Mhm.
And then in the dusk part, like only 20 minutes of that would be like really the look we would go for. So we
Yeah.
would try and get whatever our like 30 minutes of magic hour was, which is almost nothing. You can do like one setup in a half
Right.
an hour
Right.
and then we would switch over to whatever we were shooting during dusk. Sometimes we would do like a just in case rehearsal with slightly less optimal light. And then we would have like our 20-minute window of when it was best and like hopefully get everything we needed in there. And then, yeah, when we really sort of built every day around, physically where we were leading up to like what we needed for that time of day and then afterward. Or like our day, if we were shooting like splits, our day would start with our magic hour and dusk and then we would be into night, or I guess that's not splits, but
that would
it
be in the night work.
was
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I love the look of it, by the way. You mentioned like the variation of where you were and like some of those considering it's all in the desert, there's a lot of variation, like, and especially there's that wonderful sort of modern ruin that they wind up at. It seems like just to be a ruined mid-century church, I suppose. The stone
Yeah.
thing. I don't
Yeah.
even know what is that thing? What is it?
So
In reality, well, it was a turn of the century, like I think like 1913
Okay.
maybe farm
Mm.
in Acton. And when we originally saw the pictures for it, they were all like it was like a huge farm with a bunch of different buildings and they all looked like that. And then when we got out there, we found out that they had renovated more
Uh,
than half of them. So
yeah.
we got to play this dance of like what buildings can you see that still look the way we want them to,
Yeah.
and what buildings do we have to work around because they are now nice, but they are nice and brand new, which is not what
Right,
you need for the
and you
movie.
got to keep them out of the shot. Oh yeah, no,
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of people say we had to spend so much time keeping the background out of this
yeah,
location.
if you're interested in seeing what that location looks like in another movie, the Sandra Oh movie Amma that just came out
Okay.
shot at the same location as we did. We
Oh,
used
cool.
more of the desert and then the rundown buildings. But yeah,
That's awesome.
it was a challenge to make all of that work. I think originally we may have had even a little more work in the town, and then we kind of had to scale back a little bit just because it was tricky. But
Sure.
yeah, it was we were very specific about wanting to have. There's a Gus Van Sant movie called Jerry,
Hmm.
with
Which I don't remember, but still, yeah.
yeah, with Casey Affleck and Matt Damon, and it's just Casey Affleck and Matt Damon in the desert. And we watched that a couple of times while we were in prep because that movie really relies on its locations and its photography. And then we found out that they'd shot it like all over the country and in Argentina, and we were like, well, we
Huh.
can't do that. Like we
They
can't
had
make
some
our
money to
desert look.
spend on it.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
but we
But it's
were like,
very
okay, we want the first act to contain one desert look. The second act is our second desert look, and then our third act, as they're sort of marching towards hell,
Yeah.
should be a third look, so that we're keeping the visuals, telling the story, and also getting a sense of a journey, even though they are just in the desert.
But
Have
you said something interesting there where the audience, we as the audience are now accustomed to a different look every 30 minutes or so.
Mhm.
You know, that's just the way. So I think we absorb this without even being aware of it, and so
Yeah.
you kind of expect that, you know, it feels about time for a big set piece change, and
Yeah.
yeah. So all right. So the film is called Aviary. It comes out April 29th. I've been talking to Chris Cullari and Jennifer Raite. This is a very beautiful movie, and I'm really happy that you would take the time to talk to us. And I'll look for you online. I hope you have a wonderful release.
Thanks, Jason. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you very much. Have a lovely evening.
Thanks. Talk soon. Bye.
Bye.